Antoine's attention here, I'd like to suggest it. There's a man who usually takes notes for us, and I appeal to you to do notes for us. No one's been volunteering. Okay, excellent. Yeah, that's fine. We'll wait for you. Only just about at the hour here. We want you to get our thanks. That's real fun. It is confusing. You kind of have to notice, like, I'm sorry?
Oh, is that the problem? Didn't even occur to me to switch on the microphone. I guess I didn't realize it wasn't sounding in the room. So it sounds better now, even out in the room? Oh, all right. So now I'm assuming Meet Echo can hear me now. And they couldn't hear me before. Antoine, you want to step into the room and say hi? And just confirm for us that the Meet Echo is working? Oh, okay. Excellent. And I went off again. I have to watch that. What I really should do is take a moment to yeah. Where is the shoot? Well, I guess it'll stay on. Okay. There he is, Antoine. Thank you. We see you.
I had a bit of a problem with the audio as well at the beginning of the video. But I'm here now.
Okay, thank you. That was a little muffled, but I think I got that. So that's good. Yeah. We're just waiting just another minute or two here for our notes taker to be set up and ready to go. Okay. All right. So this is registration protocols extensions. Thank you everyone once again for making it to our meeting here. And we have Antoine remotely, my esteemed co-chair here, and we have your big head floating in the room, so that's great. Okay, the usual note well. So if anybody has any questions or whatever about this, encourage you to talk to your own lawyer and then come back and tell us what you decided. But in any case, the IETF owns you. That's the only thing you need to know. That's the way. That's right. You have the right to remain silent. That's what's important. And not fill out the blue sheets. Oh, and speaking of blue sheets, I can't. They're not even. Okay. Well, that was my one flaw in this process, was not getting the blue sheets ready. I'll do that in a moment. This is just a standard slide that we put up here about document reviews. I mean, we have the same problem. Other groups have this problem. You know, I mean, I think that you're more sensitive to it when you're a document author, you know. But, you know, obviously, if you want people to review your document, you should be willing to review theirs. And I think it's a good exercise for people anyway to review documents. I mean, it's important to the progress of the standards, and we certainly appreciate that. Okay, moving on to welcome and introductions. So we have a Jabber scribe and note scribe, and already introduced myself and Antoine, so that's good. So let's jump to talking about our existing document status. Very quickly, the launch phase document. We'll talk a little more about the launch phase here when we get to talking about the fee document. We had submitted this document to the ISG for publication. And Adam does have it, and it turns out that what it's waiting for, it hasn't moved to the IESG agenda in particular, because he conducts a review before he advances the document. So that's actually in progress, and he has some comments and questions he'll be bringing back to the working group shortly after we get out of this meeting. But it also turns out that as a result of the fee document interim meeting that we have some suggestions for this particular document. So we'll get to that discussion later. But yay for us for submitting a document for publication. But we'll just have to deal with sort of some minor last-minute issues here as we go along. So the next item on the agenda is to talk about the fee extension document and the interim meeting that we had with respect to that document. And Roger, we will go over to you. You come up here to the microphone and stand in the pink box so the Meet Echo folks can see you. And while you talk, I'm going to distribute the blue sheets. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. The fee document is there. We've got one last big item to solve. I don't know if it's big or not, but one last item to solve, and that deals with the launch phase and how we portray launch phase depending on what the client sends in. So originally, version 5 draft said if no launch phase was passed in, server would respond with, I think on version 5, it would respond with all active launch phases. And in our interim meeting, which we had, Jim, last week, I believe, we had 8 people participate. It was great, great turnout. We actually discussed the launch phase piece for probably about 45 minutes straight, going back on the pros and cons of each of the possibilities. And we spent an hour just on a virtual meeting. And me coming out of it, I thought it was great. We actually got to an end spot where we think this last piece, and we can actually push this final draft through and get a working group last call on it soon. So again, the fee document piece, the last remaining question, I think it's section 3 point something, 3.8. It deals with the launch phase, and it's just the outstanding questions. I posted it to the list last week. I don't think there's been a whole lot of discussion yet on it. I know Jody posted something yesterday or this morning, something about on it, laying out the 4 possible scenarios. If the client doesn't pass anything, server returns an error. It's something that I don't think the group really thought should be done. The other option was if the client does not pass anything, the server returns the current phase. The problem came in is if there's more than 2 phases or more than 1 phase active currently, what happens? So that was an outstanding question. Do you then return an error because you can't decide, or do you pass back those number of phases back, which then starts to get a little more verbose that some people didn't really want to get into. I don't know if there was a third option or not. Oh, just so it was passing back all active phases, and then they got discussion around what an active phase was, came about, and is anything current. Everybody kind of agreed on, but the discussion was if there's a future phase, would that be considered active or not? So that was one of the discussions, and I think that I don't think there's enough consensus on it. I think if we can get launch phase updated to provide the listing functionality, I think that the current should be just the current and not future, is my opinion. Questions? Jim?
This is Jim Gold from VeriSign. So yeah, I looked at the notes from the interim meeting, and I re-reviewed the section in the launch phase extension because I honestly could not remember multiple active phases. So I looked at it, and it does have text in there associated with supporting simultaneous or sequential phases. So I believe that was feedback from the list a while back to be able to support multiple active phases. I don't have a specific use case for that scenario. It would be good to know. whether or not there is a valid use case for simultaneous active. But my interpretation of active would be current, not future. And I don't believe that this would be a big deal if that's a corner case. If multiple active is truly a corner case, then returning back multiple active fees in the response, I think, is an acceptable solution. But I believe it's a corner case. So.
And I agree, Jim. And I think that if we can get launch phase updated to provide the list, then it could dictate the registrar what's actually to pass in the correct things and not an empty field or something. So
yeah, let me address the listing item. I don't believe the listing would work in launch phase or in the fee because both of those are command response extensions. They're not object extensions. This is better suited for if you're going to provide metadata about a policy or policies or features of a TLD, then do something similar to what VeriSign has done in our proprietary registry mapping extension, which when you're querying for information, it's going to come back and says, here are the phases. If they're overlapping, so be it. But that's not really what the launch phase extension is set up for, since it's an extension of domain. So it doesn't really work.
Okay.
I want to gloss over that too lightly, though. That's actually a very significant point. And those who were part of the fee extension interim meeting that we had, I know I really need to know what other people think and what you want to do about this issue. You know, from my point of view, James is basically saying that the suggestion out of that group to put the functionality into the launch phase document, that's not the right place to do it. It needs to go someplace else. This matters because the fee extension document depends on this functionality. And so, you know, it just then becomes a dependency on the part of the fee extension document. So if folks have a comment about that and what you want to do, we'd like to hear that, please. So back to you.
Thanks, Jim. Alex?
Alex Meyerhofer, Nick.at. My concern with that launch phase usage and the way it's being used, I understand by a single implementation, is that they are using it in a way for which we actually envision the class to be used. So I'm not sure whether a more favorable path would actually to ask the implementer, the one implementer who uses it in that way, why he actually can't use the classes instead of that. Yeah. And regarding my general point about the fee extension, my requirement to the change to the document is that the fee extension must work on a registry that is completely unaware of launch phases. Yeah, we might have cases out there, and we are running a CCTLD registry as well, and we don't have any launch phases there. If we ever decide to do premium names or something like that, we want to use the fee extension, but we're not going to introduce launch phases just because of the fee extension. So that's my base requirement. However we get there, I don't have a super strong opinion. I'm just worried about bending the standard because the implementation choice of a single implementation. Yeah, and that's what I also said at the interim meeting.
So before you walk away, just to make sure I understand, I mean, as it is now, we do meet your requirements, right? So is there a change that you're nervous of that? Because
the document says I should list all the available phases. Yeah, a registry that is completely unaware of the launch phases, would it be fine if it returned an empty set of elements? Yeah. If that's okay, fair enough. Yeah.
So you're talking about the feature
that tight connection between one extension and the other extension, because as you know, as soon as you put two things together, it typically doesn't get simpler.
Right. So, I mean, what I recall from the interim meeting discussion is you thought well of, you did want to move that particular functionality out of the fee document, right? The idea of returning all the valid launch phases. And right now it currently works so that if you don't give a launch phase, you do get a response.
Yeah.
And I think all of that meets your requirements. And so other than that, you're...
Okay. I just want to avoid the misuse of the launch phases for an application use case for which the class attribute was actually intended for. Yeah, and I understand we also had different prices during Sunrise and blah blah blah, of course. But like introducing 100 launch phases just because we have 100 price classes is not the right thing if you have the class attribute available as well. But
Thanks, Alex.
finally, don't get me wrong, I want to get this done, so I hope we can submit it to publication before Singapore.
We will. Jody?
Jody Calker, GoDaddy. So one of the questions that I had is at times during a registry's launches, there are there's no phase available. For instance, there could be a quiet period between Sunrise and Land Rush and GA, or any of the other phases that you could have. So during that time, I guess what I'd like to try to figure out is what gets returned if no launch phase is sent in while there is no phase available. Is nothing available to be registered then? That kind of thing.
This is Jim Gold from VeriSign. I would say no. If there's a gap between the two, and that you're not accepting registrations at that point, then the fee would not come back with anything because you can't register at that point. But then if obviously it rolled into, let's say, Land Rush or claims, then it would return back the appropriate fee. But if the registrar wanted to know what the fee was for the future phase, then they can obviously ask for it. Yes.
Yeah, that makes sense. So basically, when you're in a quiet period, the registrar has to send in a fee if they want to know what it is, or the phase, I'm sorry.
Hey, Jim, will that come back unavailable?
Oh, the domain name? That's good. A good question. We don't have those gaps in our systems. So I'd like to hear from one of the other registries that may have a gap. My assumption is it would come back as unavailable because otherwise it'll then fail on the create if there's not an active phase. So.
Anyone have thoughts on that? During a quiet period, a check will come back unavailable. All checks will, unless the phase has been identified.
So, Jim Galvin, and just to clarify, make sure that I understand this, because I'm just remembering a discussion that we had before. Yeah, what you're saying is that if the phase is not active, then it's not available. If a create command will not succeed, then it has to be indicated as unavailable. That's the way that this extension will work. If a create command would fail, then it shouldn't show up here as available.
I think that's actually a question independent of this extension. So take away the fee extension and you don't have an active phase and a registrar asks whether or not a domain is available. Are you going to return back true, that's available? You could, but then the create will fail, right?
Right.
And honestly, our registries do not have this gap period. So if there is a registry that does have a gap period, it'd be great to hear from that registry.
Hello, Chris from Core Association. I have seen both. Some registries return unavailable, some return available, and then when you do the create, there's nothing there. It doesn't work. So I don't know if that's within the scope of what we're trying to do with this extension, though, because that's up to the registry to decide what they're going to return in availability. And can we force them with this extension to do something else? I would assume no.
We could provide guidance, Jim Galvin speaking. I mean, obviously we could, I mean, I don't know that, I guess the question is whether it should be a must or a should. I think my going in position would be it should be a should, that the way you should behave if someone asks for a price is whether or not you say it's available or unavailable should depend on whether a create would succeed or fail. And we could make an indication that way. I mean, as a registrar, what would you prefer? I mean, this is also, I mean, as James said, there's partly this, what do other registries do in a gap condition? What would registrars like to see?
I think it should be available. It should show as available, but it should have some caveat, maybe in a region field, something that the launch phase is not active right now, or something like that. Because the domain, saying it's unavailable could mean that the domain is registered already. So how can we tell the customer why this domain name is not available? So we need both the availability and the reason behind the unavailability of it.
Scott Hollenbeck. I'm going to disagree slightly, and I'm going to go back to the core specs to explain why. The purpose of a check command is to give you a hint as to whether or not a create command will succeed or fail, right? And modulo anything that happens in between the execution of the check and the create, right? So if you return available in response to a check, and then you fail a create, right? And not because the domain got registered in the interim, I think that is misleading and is counter to the very specific text that is in the core part of the specs right now.
So I hear you arguing on behalf of what we should say in the spec here is, yeah, we should tie it to the create command. We should actually say you should only say available if a create command would succeed.
Yeah, I mean, there's other reasons for a create to fail, so we have to be specific about that it's because of a quiet period or whatever. But yeah, I think that makes sense.
So I'll have to find the right text.
And I think to answer Chris's question, I think that if we did do that, we could pass a reason back in the fee check or the fee extension piece that says reason, and it's a quiet period or whatever.
This is Ulrich from IS. I think we should tie it to the original check command, because I mean that is what we're going for, right? We're sending a check, and so the semantics should follow the the original. So like Scott pointed out, the check should return available if a create command would succeed, and it should return unavailable if it won't succeed. So and that is what we should use here too. We shouldn't, this extension shouldn't change the behavior, and it shouldn't define the behavior at all. It should just say we use the original behavior, and that is what we're going to use in this extension.
So I guess I just want to, Jody Kalker from GoDaddy. I just want to wrap this up a little bit. So basically, if what we pass in the check command is going to be used to create the domain name, that's how we're going to determine whether it's available or not. So you have to have the correct phases on it, all the correct extensions on it in order to do the check command to return whether it's available or not, because those same extensions will be passed in with the create command. No.
Yes, Jim Gold from VeriSign. I'd say no, just because there are different set of extensions that may be applicable only to the create. So I wouldn't try to make as a precondition having to pass extra extensions on the check for the check to effectively work as defined in the core. Is that fair?
Yeah, absolutely. But but you at least need some extensions for some of these. You need to have the fee extension on it, right? And the launch phase to create for some of these. Oh, hang on. I'm sure that there's registries that have needed the launch phase on there in order to register the domain.
This is Jim Gold again. Yeah, no, you don't need the launch phase extension specifically. For one thing, you're providing the capability of including the phases in the fee extension, so it's self-contained.
Yes.
You mean including the phases? Okay, got it.
Not the full extension, but including the phases.
Oh yeah, no, I would suggest that. I'm sorry, I apologize. If the phase is not passed, then based on what you've defined in 3.8, the fee extension, I honestly don't have much of an issue with that as long as we understood what multiple active phases meant, right? And then if a future phase or in essence a future phase was desired, then the registrar could go ahead and provide that. Oh, but that was about availability though, right? So the availability was that, yeah, if the current phase is a gap, then in essence, the availability in the for the domain itself should be unavailable, and then the fee should be unavailable.
Right.
And I agree with the point made previously.
Okay, so I think in trying to bring this to a close, there are still two. I think you understand what has to happen here with all of this, right? Yep. So we're good with that. You're going to provide some revised text.
Yes.
Question that I have though is, do you believe that you've heard consensus of what to do with the launch phase stuff? Because I heard James saying it shouldn't go into the launch phase document. As document editor here or of this document, what are you suggesting for the working group to consider for taking that particular issue forward?
Yeah, I think that we still have to decide on that piece of where is that going to come from, because I think that's functionality that's still needed, and people don't want to provide it in the fee, which doesn't seem like it should be. And as Jim suggested, it doesn't seem like it fits in the launch phase. So where are we going to put that piece?
And I'll let James speak a little bit to that, but I think in the interest of time, we're going to have to move on and take it to the list too. But please go ahead.
Yeah, again, I believe it's a corner case for multiple active phases. So I'd really like to hear a specific use of that. So in essence, saying that it's needed, I guess I'm not sure if I'm in agreement that it's needed, because it sounds like a corner case. And then if we're going to go down that path of providing information around phases, then we should think of it more generically, not just about phases, but features and policies as well.
Well, yeah, and I can give you the case is when you do a pre-registration, you pre-register for multiple phases, and you need to know what those phases are that are coming up so that you can pre-reg for them. Because you may pre-reg for Sunrise, or you may pre-reg for GA, but if you don't know what those phases are, how are you going to pre-reg for those?
Well, in that scenario, you're talking about future phases.
Yes.
So that doesn't match the use case of multiple active phases. So that's a different use case.
No, the use case of providing a list of phases that the registry has.
But that's even different, right? So now if you're talking about the case of multiple active to support the fee extension,
Yes.
now we're talking about all the phases.
Yes, and my email to the list mentions both of those.
Okay, great.
Scenarios.
Like I said, if it's more encompassing, that we might want to make a more generic extension, provide not just phases, but other information as well, similar to what VeriSign has already created in our proprietary registry mapping extension.
Okay.
Take a look at it. I think I've already posted a list. I'll post it to the list again. Take a look at it and see whether or not that kind of information, which includes all the phases, by the way, would be applicable.
So to your point, I will post to the list that separate question, hold out of this so that we can separate the items and move forward.
And you could also post a revised document with what we have now so that we can look at those differences. And then when this closes, there'll be one more revision and then we can submit it for publication. So, okay.
Good.
All right. Thank you very much.
Oh, by the way, I'm in favor of interim meetings again, just in case no one got that. I think they work well and we're probably going to have more, hopefully.
There's a spot on the end of the agenda to talk about interim meetings.
Okay. And I think we should have multiple meetings here like we did in Chicago.
Yeah. He's going to post a revised document with at least the consensus that came out of the interim meeting and the little bit of discussion that we just had here. And then the second thing is he will post as a separate question to the list how to deal with the feature of being able to find out and discover all the launch phases, all the phases that are available for a given domain name. Okay. Next up, Linlin to talk about at the organization extension document. These were previously the reseller documents, if you recall, and we had quite a bit of discussion about this in our last session about generalizing this object to, rather than being a reseller explicitly, let's just make it an organization object. So she's here going to tell us about the changes that she made as part of moving in that direction. And so we have your slides here. And
Yes.
And I will just say next slide or look at me and I'll move them along for you.
Okay. Hello everyone, and today I will give a very quick update on the organization extension drafts. Actually, we have discussed reseller drafts for many times, and the working group and also had many opinions about the reseller direction. We had the listed four options at a Seoul IETF meeting, I think. And finally, the working group decided to do a new object, organization object. And it will have many different type of roles, including registrar, registry, and reseller, and many other type of roles the registry defined. And so all of the co-authors of this draft had discussed many times, and we did spend some time to update the reseller draft to the current organization draft. And this
So
is,
Lin, just the same slide is down in front of you, so you don't have to turn around. You can speak into the mic.
I didn't see it. Okay, for the organization extension draft, the modification is relatively simple because there is only one element ID in the extension part, and we add an attribute with the ID element, the row attribute that represent the relationship an organization would have. And the values are defined in row value registries, and you can update all the values. Next. This is in the slide. There is a simple info response example, and the ID will have a list of rows such as the reseller, privacy proxy. And next, please. And for the organization extension draft, and we have some new elements, including the ID, status, and organization row elements with two sub elements. And one is a type, and it also has a row status attribute. And the other sub element is the optional row ID. This row ID element is defined to have a third party assigned ID, such as the INA ID for a registrar. And this is an optional choice. And the following is an example of the row element. And next, please. This slide is about the row value that I mentioned before. This is the we have some initial values defined in this registry. We list the registrar, reseller, and the privacy proxy. And also you have your own values. You could give us feedback, and we can update this part. Next, please. And when we putting forward the reseller drafts, we have many comments and feedbacks on the mailing list, and many experts talk to us. And we always heard about why reseller is important than registrar or some other rows of organizations. So it is done. We changed it to a generic object organization object extension. And we also heard about maybe this extension is a little complicated, and we tried our best to minimize the required fields. There are only 7 now. And if for just one single type of organization, if you just extend the reseller, I think maybe you can identify and reseller from its name. But for many multiple types of organizations, that maybe it's a little difficult for us to just identify a reseller from a name. So I think it is needs to have a row or organization object. And also, this is a new start for the organization drafts. So also need comments and reviews. That's all. Thank you.
So an important consideration for the working group is, is this document now in a place where it's ready to move forward or not? And so one question that I have for you, Lin, is do you have any work in your mind to do on these documents now? We kind of had the discussion about generalizing it to organization. Are there any open questions in your mind with respect to these documents?
Of course, in my mind that this is the working group discussion, and many actors have suggested to do a more generic organization object. So we changed the text and XML formats and to certify all these requirements. And also we have some requirements to extend the result. Based on the reseller, we also have many other role types of organizations. So I think that we like to move forward with both jobs.
Okay, James?
Yeah, I wanted to make a statement as well. I'm a co-author on this, and we worked together to come up with this based on the working group feedback. I think what's needed now is some implementation experience. And my proposal would be for the registries to potentially use this for the registrar information. Because I don't know, VeriSign's, like, for example, created a custom extension for providing WHOIS information to support transfers. This might be an alternative mechanism for registrars to be able to get information about the other registrar directly in line without going to WHOIS and that sort of thing. Just an idea of getting some experience in using this, because then the next step would be for reseller information if the registrars want to do that.
So this might be a good opportunity to just get an indication from folks. I'm assuming that let's see, Nick, folks, that you have implemented this or will.
Yes, we have. Actually, before we do the reseller reps, we already have implemented part of the. Yes, we have implemented a part of the extension, and so we will do it.
Is there anyone else who has implemented or will implement, or I guess maybe just a quick show of hands? Anyone want to comment? James coming to the microphone.
We have implemented the reseller version, and I intend to update our SDK to support the organization. And we're going to be looking and discussing internally related to formally supporting it in production.
Thank you.
Chris from Core Association again. We intend to implement this extension when it's in a finalized state.
Okay. Well, I think what I'm hearing here is, oh, I'm sorry, Scott, go ahead.
Scott Hollenbeck. Not that I'm going to say anything counter to what Jim said, but what I would suggest then in terms of moving forward, remember, implementation is not a requirement, right? However, there was a recent RFC 70-something that describes an implementation status section that can be added to internet drafts. What I would suggest we do then is add that text, capture everything we know about existing implementations, and move forward from there.
Yes, thank you. So I think, where we are at this point is there clearly is some traction. So we have some implementations that are going to happen, and this document appears to be stable at the moment. And so it's important to move to that step. So I think the status of the document is to bring to the mailing list a desire to learn about implementation status and have people report to the list on what they have done or will do, and capture all of that. And then we can make a decision about when to move forward. Ideally, if we can find at least 2 people who will put an implementation status in there of actual implementations,
Yes.
then at least 2, then I would say we can much more comfortably suggest to move the document forward.
Okay.
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 All right. Nothing else then. Thank you. That's good. Next up, we have a new presentation a new proposal for a document for this group to consider, and I believe Tom is here. Yes, okay. Tom to come up, and this one I have to switch slides for. So please go ahead.
Hi. This draft is about returning historical records via RDAP, so allowing people to see previous versions of objects, and also being able to determine how an object appeared at a given point in time. Sorry, next slide. There are various use cases here. One is transfer recipients, so people wanting to see who held, say, an IP address block throughout its history. Disputants, so when people are in conflict over a resource, they'll be able to see whether any suspicious changes have been made to any of the relevant records. There's law enforcement use cases, so being able to see who controlled an IP address block at a given point in time. And then more open-ended, there are research use cases as well. The main element of this draft is a new RDAP object class called history. It contains a list of records where each of the records contains, in turn, an RDAP object and a date period. And the date period defines the time for which that object was current. The date period is half open, so as to allow for easy sequencing of records. And retrieval of objects is agnostic as to the underlying RDAP object class. So it works for the currently defined object classes as well as any that might come up in the future. So this is just an example of an object returned from this service. It's an ASN. Yeah, so it shows the date ranges, and there's an extra RDAP conformance value as well. Next slide. IP address ranges are a bit different compared with the other object types because they can be split or aggregated over time. So, for example, if somebody queries for 24, but when they query, the only object that exists is a covering 22, but previously that more specific 24 existed, there's an argument that maybe only the 24's history should be returned, or perhaps the 22, or yeah. So it's not, rather than try to, I guess, pick one or the other, the draft goes a simple route and just says return everything that covers, everything that intersects whenever it existed. Next slide. There are obvious issues with running a historical service over and above a standard registry service, things like mistaken data entry, them being removed, historical data that reflects poorly on somebody, and also people looking at the historical data and misinterpreting its currency. So people going to contact people who used to look after a block or a record and them getting very confused about what's going on. A couple of options here. RDAP allows for the omitting of data from responses. So, for example, PII might be omitted from historical responses. And also a history service could be put behind authentication. And there are a few different options there. The first link here is to the public history service that APNIC runs at the moment. The second is to the backend for that service. And the third is a rudimentary front end that allows for querying and seeing object diffs over time. Next slide. We'd very much appreciate any review and feedback. A couple of open issues are how to handle redirections. So in the numbers space where an IP address block has moved from one registry to another, there's a question about how to best represent that in this document. And then we're coming at this very much from a numbers perspective. So if there are probable issues around forward domains that we're not thinking of. So any feedback along those lines would be great as well. We're not looking for adoption just yet, mainly because we're conscious of the number of milestones that are already in play and the number of documents that are probably looking for that and have already been discussed. So yeah, just looking to gauge interests at the moment. That's it, thanks.
Okay. Let me just take a moment to remind folks in the working group There's almost always a few new people around. So the registration extensions working group actually serves two roles. One, of course, is to process any kind of document in the registration extensions area, which applies to both EPP and RDAP, things that want to go onto the standards track. So we have that role in conducting that review and adoption, and then moving it through the formal process for all of that. In addition, the working group and the mailing list in particular is open and available for anyone with a related document who is looking for appropriate expertise to get some review. There is an explicit use case for this, which is the IANA registry of EPP extensions. These are not required to be internet standards, so people can certainly create extensions, which they can then simply ask to get listed in that registry, which is always allowed. There is a technical review that happens to items that go into that registry, mostly just for self-consistency and if any conflicts exist. But folks are use this mailing list. The mailing list for this working group is used as the contact point for people who submit a request to IANA to get on that registry. So they get reviewed by this working group. Scott Hullenbeck actually leads the team of people who are responsible for those documents. But in any case, we encourage these kinds of things. So I just want to make that clear. He's allowed to come here and say, you know, this is not for adoption yet, but he is looking for some review and comments from the expertise in this group. And there's no one jumping up to the mic who seems to want to say something, but I do, you know, you're encouraged, please, to continue on the mailing list, press on the document, and we'll try to move this forward. And if and when you're ready to ask for adoption, we'll take that step too. Okay, so that takes care of actual active technical work at the moment. So this is a slot in the agenda where the co-chairs would like to walk down each of the other documents that have milestones in our charter and on our milestone list and on the data tracker, and give a quick discussion about each of the authors of these documents was asked to come up to the mic one at a time and just take a couple of minutes to give their version of 2 minutes of what's the next step on their document. So what we want to do as the chairs is we are looking to make sure that the milestones are still listed in the order that are interesting here. So this is your opportunity to hear about these documents, make sure that you see what's coming. They are listed here in the order in which they are milestones. Probably would have been helpful to pull the dates forward onto this slide, I suppose, to remind people what they are on the milestone list. But I think we want to make this a regular part of our agenda here as a better way to track our work, make it visible to people that these documents are there and what their status is. So we're just going to step through these documents one at a time, give everybody a chance to say what they want to say about the documents. We'll take a couple of questions if anybody has anything about any one of the documents. If in particular, if you want to speak to saying that a document should move up in the priority list, you'd like to see a reordering of these documents and a reordering of the work, we'd like to hear that. Recall from Chicago, we actually did a review of all of our milestones. We made a presentation then. We had built up, the co-chairs had built up in working in the background with document authors, the milestone list. We made a presentation to the working group, which was generally agreed. There was consensus about that list, but we want to allow for a re-examination of that at each one of these meetings to make sure that we stay on track and that everyone gets the priority that they want for these documents. So I apologize for going on a little bit long there. Questions to the group? Listen to the document status. If you have any questions about the document, please stand up and ask, and consider if you want to reorder this list, okay? Because we're going to be going through these documents in this order as we progress the open ones that we have. That's the intent. Any questions about that process and what we're doing here? Okay, then we'll just step right up to the first one, which is the change poll document.
Yeah, so for the change poll, the latest revision was to change the authorship. Sharon had left Newstar, so Cal volunteered to take authorship on behalf of Newstar for this particular draft. And the latest revision as well added the implementation status information for VeriSign, and Cal intends, where's Cal? Here you are. All right. Cal is going to add the implementation status for Newstar to the draft as well. And as far as this particular extension is concerned, this is completely generic. I highly encourage the registries to review this and consider this for any server-side changes that are occurring. And I encourage the registrars to express the value of this extension, because I know that this was built for the registrars to be able to more easily reconcile things that are occurring in the registries. So the more this is used, the easier it will be for registrars to be able to be proactively notified of changes occurring to their objects. So, and one use of this particular extension that we're considering doing, I know there was a discussion at a prior conference, was deletion of unused objects. And for the registries out there that have a lot of unused objects, and if you're looking to purge them, notification of a deletion of an unused object would be a perfect use case for this particular extension. So,
Okay. Would it be fair to, well, let's get discussion first.
This is Roger. And I'd like to promote Jim's suggestion of registries looking at this. As a registrar, we would love to see registries implement this. We've been pushing this for quite a while, and I thank Jim for putting this on the list to get done. But yes, we definitely look forward to this being completed. So hurry up.
So my question to you is, would it be fair to say that from your point of view, this document's relatively stable, and unless comments or questions come up here, it should be expected to move along fairly quickly?
Yes, that's correct. I see it as stable, and we, in our multiple instances of using this extension, have not seen an issue with it. So that's why review and feedback from the other registries would be highly valuable. But again, I see it as stable at this point.
Okay. So, and
can I suggest that Jim, Roger, can I suggest that Jim hold an interim meeting so we can move this forward quickly?
We'll come back to that. Okay,
Yeah,
next one is allocation token. And you get to keep the floor.
Yeah, so allocation token, again, this is a collaboration between VeriSign and Newstar. This is a very, very simple extension, exceedingly simple. But the whole idea here is the fact that it can be used for many different use cases. The most recent updates were, again, changing the authorship. Cal, again, volunteered to take co-authorship of this. And we added in the implementation status section, and Cal will go ahead and update it with Newstars. And actually, Newstar is farther ahead on production use of this particular extension. But its original intent was to be able to support auctioning off of domain names by third parties and allow for the allocation to be passed through from the registrar that could be compared on the registry to authorize the allocation of a domain name. But there are so many other use cases that we've seen for this. So to answer your next question, which is, it is absolutely stable. It's as simple as you can get, just passing a token across from the registrar to the registry. But where the complexity comes in is, what is the form of the token? You can have many different use cases on this. It could be a string, it could be an encoded block of XML. It could be just about anything. The point is that you need to be able to pass this information from the registrar to the registry to be able to allocate a domain name.
Okay, thank you. Any comments or questions from anyone?
It's Watson from Affiliates. Would it work for the name that need to be claimed from the clearinghouse?
For the trademark clearinghouse? It's actually very similar to the use of the sign mark.
But the clearinghouse requirement is you have to show that token. Well, you have to show that whatever they return from the clearinghouse to the registrant.
Right, that is a token. It has a different purpose though, because in the case of, like, for example, the launch phase extension, that's being used as a precondition to be able to register a name. In the case of the allocation token, it may be something that is being that exists that needs to be allocated based on the use of this token. There have been use cases where this extension has been used, where a registry operator would pre-authorize the registration of domain name and then have that pass through the channel to authorize the registration. So there has a little bit of overlap, but I'm not sure if it would be an exact match to meeting the needs of the TMCH.
Okay, we'll look into it.
Any other questions or comments? No? Well, then thank you, James. Next up on the list is the DNS operator and Matt Pouncett.
Hi. So a few months ago, we thought we were pretty close to being done on this, but a few new things have come up. So we've got a few small changes that are going to be going into the draft. Jacques Latour ran a panel at the last ICANN meeting on policy impacts of CDS and CDNS key records. And there are a few outcomes from that that are relevant, although they might not have a huge impact on the draft itself. Generally comments that the policies need to be reviewed to make sure that third-party DNS operators are recognized in the registration ecosystem. And just a general lack of clear model for DNSSEC information moving around between all parties. One thing that did come out of this that's sort of important, though, is the common wisdom about the limitations of who can accept or use CDS and CDNS key, or who can accept CD or DS and DNS key records from registrants. The common wisdom is this is essentially can only be done by the registrars, but there was a bit of research done into the contracts, and it shows that what it says about registries is they will accept DNSSEC material according to industry practices, but not from whom. And the registrar's contracts say that they will relay DNSSEC material according to industry practice, but it doesn't make it their exclusive responsibility. So this doesn't have a huge impact on what's in the draft, but it does change who can implement very significantly. Of course, if registries are going to do this, there needs to be a way to push data back down to registrars, because it's important for them to be able to see what their registrants have in their delegations. So I think we're interested in seeing any comments on list if anyone has any definitive information to the contrary about this, or general comments about how this might change the way things work in the draft. So we had some comments from Mark Elkins suggesting that we adopt some of the things that were used by ISC in bootstrapping DNS in their DLV system. One thing that looks particularly useful there would be inserting a record in the registries zone that indicates the entry point for an API. If registries are going to implement this, would help with scalability a lot. So we're considering different options there. Something that looks particularly promising to me is SRV, but of course we'd need a new protocol name for that. So we have 4 known implementations at the moment. Sira has one running as a registry. Gandhi is registrar. APNIC is currently using this for reverse zones. And there's a new implementation in CZNIC's FRED registry, which implements both daily CDS and CDNS key scanning, as well as this protocol for registries that don't want to do active scans on all zones all the time. So our current plans are to produce a new version of the draft. I'm hoping within the next couple of weeks, once we sort of sort out among ourselves how these new changes affect things. And we're hoping really for more comments on the draft Antoine made some great comments that we need to incorporate. But if anyone has any further comments related to what he had to say or anything of their own, we'd really like to hear it.
This is Jim Gold from VeriSign. In re-reviewing the draft recently, I recommend adding some type of flow at the top related to authentication, authorization, because it wasn't clear. You know, I looked at it, I was like, I thought that it was something where the registries were going to start pulling information out of DNS, but then the RESTful calls to be able to go ahead and initiate actions.
Yeah.
I'm assuming it's on the registry side. I'm not sure, or the registrar. So I'm not seeing that. I'm not. I haven't reviewed it in enough detail.
Okay. Well,
to
we
see all those things come together.
We might be able to make that clearer. The intention was that the protocol could be implemented at the registry or the registrar. We have a section in the most recent version about. I think we chose a distinct phrase to refer. I think it was registration agent. And which we defined as being either the registry or the registrar, whoever it is who has the closest business relationship with the registrant, and sort of indicate that that's the place where this is intended to be implemented, and that if that's the registrar, that they would be doing all this work and then passing information, for example, through EPP up to the registry. But we can probably put something in there to make the workflow a little clearer.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
So, Jim Galvin, let me insert myself into the queue while I'm sitting here, but not wearing a hat. So, Jim Galvin from Affiliates. I appreciate that you folks had done the detailed analysis of contracts and determining, who is allowed to do something and who's not. And from a technical point of view, all of that is true, and I agree with all of that. Since I've been the one who's been pressing on this a lot with you folks, not you specifically, but Oliver and Jacques and others, I just feel compelled to continue to go on record and point out that part of industry best practices is the relationship that registrars and registries have with each other. Of course, there is a question of documentation on all of this, but in principle, the standing industry best practice is registries don't tell registrars what their data should be. Registrars own the data. So the idea that a registry would take in these DS records and this key information and then push it back to the registrar is, not a foregone conclusion. And I don't know if any registrars in the room want to stand up and speak to this in particular, but my experience with registrars is no, they're not interested in that, at least on the GTLD side. But if we could change that, that'd be fine.
Yeah, and as an occasional third-party operator and an end user who likes to manage his own data, I'm perfectly happy with anybody to implement this. We specifically designed it so it can be implemented sort of at any level of the registration. Yeah.
And as an individual, I think it's great protocol. I certainly don't have any issues with it, and I think it's it's a fine piece of work. But I am very concerned about the policy side of it. So if I wear my registry service provider hat, I just have to stand on that particular principle. But anyway.
Yeah, this isn't a thing we intend to incorporate into the draft, but it is. We're concerned. We are also concerned about the policy implications. So we've been trying to get the community to discuss that and see what shakes out.
Right. Yeah. Not this community, the ICANN community, right?
Well, yes, yeah, the community in general. Yes.
Right. Thank you.
This is Jody from GoDaddy, just speaking as a registrar. Yeah, we're not comfortable as a registrar having the data changed underneath without the registrar being in the loop first. Yeah. That's always been a concern of ours. Just stating it.
So the trailing question, since no one else is getting up to the mic, obviously over to you guys, is I guess at this point you're still doing work and you're still working the document. So you don't have any immediate plans to suggest that it's stable and ready to move forward.
No, we definitely have at least one more version to go and see where comments are after that.
Okay, sounds good. All right, thank you. And next up is the bundling registration document. Yes, please come up to the pink box.
My name is Jiankang Yao. So I introduced bundling registration I think in Seoul meeting. I'm not sure. Currently there are, according to the WD discussion, there are 3 bundling. First is strict bundling. Second is partial bundling. Third is relaxed bundling. Current document is most focused on strict bundling. This bundling is require most the registrants share the same a lot of the attributes. So currently we have .hk, .cn, and .zhongguo, and .mo, .sg, and .tw. So also a lot of Chinese Chinese TLD use this bundling registration system. So we already have a lot of experience. In Seoul meeting, we have some proposal. We have merged also partial bundling and strict bundling and relaxed bundling together with one uniform solution. But after several months discussion, we cannot easily get the uniform solution. So I think the current best way to do push forward is use the first is strict bundling and another is partial bundling, and third is relaxed bundling. So since this draft, the method is already matured, so we like to push forward. Thank you.
Okay, so just a quick comment on the history of this document, just to remind the working group, when this document was originally brought forward, we actually, I guess it was 2 IETF meetings ago, so I guess it was Seoul, we had the BOF on DNS bundling. And we had decided in this working group, we put this document on hold at the time, pending what would happen in that particular working group with DNS bundling. So there was an opportunity there for all bundling parts to go into a separate working group. So that we had that BOF, but there was no follow-on proposal for a working group. So now we're just putting this document, we're taking this document off of a hold status, if you will, kind of our own internal designation, and putting it on the list. It is at the end of our milestone list at the moment, so it's not something which is going to come up here in the near term. But I think I just heard you also say that you're actually ready to move this forward into making it a work item. So should I interpret from that that you would like to see it reordered in the milestone list to come closer towards the top?
I think current order is okay.
Oh, okay. All right. So it's still a future work item for the moment. Go ahead, Ning. You want to say something different?
Ning from Cynic. I think because the draft we think is mutual, so if possible, we would like to move forward. Yes. Yeah. The order, remove the order is okay.
So in front of, okay, in front of everything that's there, or you just want to see it move up? Sorry, I'm just trying to be specific here for what the ask is.
Move up is okay for me. Yeah. Yes.
Okay. Any other questions or comments about this document or changing its priority? Then, Alex?
Is this a report just you guys or other registries interested in that?
So the question from Alex is this important just to CNNIC, or is it important to anyone else, this particular document and proposal? Can you, come to the microphone, please?
It's Jia Guixie from Thailand Info. we have implemented this draft in our SRS system, and our chart is Chinese dot 信息. In English is information. So till now, we have implemented this draft for nearly 1 year. It works well in our system. Thank you.
So a quick question, I don't actually recall offhand. Is there an implementation status section in the document today?
No special saying about implementation status, but in .hk, .sg, and .tw, .mo also implement this mechanism. So we also have a CDNC table. We have maintained the table for more than 10 years. So I think for especially used for Chinese domain names. So I think it is okay for us. A lot of Chinese domain TLDs, also a lot of Chinese domain names under the second tier and the ASCII TLD.
So I think at least one action that should come out of this is to put a particular question on the mailing list. You should ask on the mailing list, or if you know the answer, you can just create it. But ask for implementation status and gather that up and create that section in the document, okay, and collect that so that we have that data. But James, go ahead, please.
Yeah, this is Jim Gould from VeriSign. So just to clarify, there are 3 forms of bundles. One was association. So we're going to go object-oriented here. So association was pretty much client-specified relationships. The next level was aggregation, where there are separate actual instances that may share some, by policy, some attributes, specifically the sponsorship. So they're separate life cycles and that sort of thing. And then the last form is composite, which is what I believe this draft matches, where it's a share-all kind of scenario with enablement and that sort of thing. And I just wanted to point out, at least, and the reason I came up here is that we have a proprietary extension called the related domain extension that supports the association and the aggregation. And we really would not have a need for the composite one of this draft.
Ning from Cynic, based on the RFC 3743 and the Chinese domain name, if one register your preferred Chinese domain name, and based on the Chinese domain name variant table, and the registry will also send you the simplified domain names and also the traditional version of domain name. So that means all the registries who sell the Chinese domain names, most registries based on the RFC 3743 and the domain name registered can get not only one domain names. He will get a bundle of domain names.
Thank you.
Question from the Jabber room, because Antoine is having mic trouble. He says, since strict bundling is not a uniform solution, should it be a standards track document or informational?
So we try to be standard track. So may draft standard track.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So I think at the moment, then the right action. We do need to make a decision about how and when to change the milestones. I think what I'd like to propose is that we take that to the mailing list, that question, so that we can allow some other discussion. I'm going to presume right up front that most people probably don't have that close a look at the milestone list. So we'll construct a question for the mailing list. The chairs will construct a question for the mailing list with the dates on the current milestones that are there. And give us, so the working group has all that information right in front of them, and then ask explicitly the question of whether folks want to move this up or what they want to do next after the documents that are in progress. Okay, we're not going to take on the work item anyway until we discharge a couple of the open ones. So we have a little bit of time here to discuss whether it should be next on the list. Make sense? Okay, that's it then. Thank you.
Thank you.
So next up is the validate draft. Back over to Roger. I believe this is actually the last one, right? Oh, I should actually offer, just as a point of clarification, this is an interesting oversight that has carried forward from when this was the EPP Extensions Working Group, because this document actually has its origins as part of the original chartering of EPP Extensions and coming forward. And what's interesting is in preparation for this meeting, your co-chairs discovered an interesting gap in doing an audit on the milestones. And that is that while this is an accepted and adopted document on the list, there actually is no milestone for it. The milestone is currently missing, which is kind of interesting. I have actually spoken to our area director about this, so he's aware of this, and in recognition of the fact that this actually did come with us from way back in EPP Extensions, we're going to submit a milestone for this, and he will approve that and allow it to get on the list so that it's part of what we're dealing with. We have not actually decided exactly where on the list this will go. Right now it's at the end and at the bottom, and we'll have to figure out exactly where we think it ought to go. So if you have any advice about that, we'll sort of take that question to the mailing list, but we can make all of that happen, and our area director is ready for that. Okay. And I'm betting that no one actually noticed that, right? Anyone here actually noticed that besides us somewhere along the way? But anyway, interesting. So, Roger, over to you.
Okay, the validate is a mapping to validate contacts into a registry pre-transformation command so that you can get a valid set of contacts, be it one for whatever's needed for the registry to be validated before you actually issue the create command that will end up failing, because you can create a completely valid contact at a registry, but you can't use it as a registrant, or you can't use it as an admin specifically. So they'll allow the contact create to happen, and they'll fail the create domain. So this actually tests that prior to a create, so that you can actually get a valid set of contacts going in. This document is fairly simple, straightforward. I think it's only 7 pages with title and index, everything. So it's a quick read. Status is it's done. It's been through several comment periods, not comment periods, but several iterations. And right now it just sits in waiting for to get bumped up.
Okay. Any quick comments or discussion from anyone? Okay, so you consider the document stable and ready to go forward, and pending any issues that might surface, you're ready for it to move up on the list.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, that takes us through that and moves us onto the RDAP object tag. In this case, I don't think I was looking for Scott to say anything here. It was really just a reminder, and I think you've probably at this point, heard everything we're saying about adoption. Having talked to our area director, folks will remember from the Chicago meeting that when this document came up and it was presented there and we talked about it, although there seemed to be in the room at the time some consensus to adopt this document, the area director had pushed back and had asked instead that we really have to get our long list of milestones under control. So one of the things that has happened, as you know, is we have actually trimmed the set of milestones. So now it's, because we actually dropped a couple of documents off along the way here when they've been reordered. And we have actually submitted the launch phase, but it hasn't moved forward onto the ISG queue. The feed document is just about ready to go too, so we'll get past that. But the explicit guidance from our area director is let's move along the work in progress, a couple of items that are work in progress, and as soon as those are actually on the ISG agenda and they're actually in the publication cycle itself, then we can come back and adopt this document and add it to our list and, pick up some of the other milestones and move it along. So it has to remain pending until we close on some of the other items that are there. And that's just a procedural point more than anything. Any comments or questions about that? Scott, please. Oh, and where'd the microphone go?
Very short person.
Okay, so just one thought there. We know fairly well that within a few months, we're going to start seeing RDAP implementation in pilot phases among GTLD registries. For those of us who are in the room and who care about this, I'd really like you to take a look at this draft. If you are going to be implementing support for contacts in RDAP, this document describes an operational practice for how to tag them in a way that's consistent with existing practice that's being done by the RIRs today. It will help with the bootstrapping of contact queries if you think that that's a problem, right? And if you do take a look at it, if you start to implement RDAP in a pilot and you think this is helpful, please let me know. I would like to keep the document alive and active in terms of adding implementation status information. Right? And indeed, once this finally does get adopted, there's not a lot here in terms of controversy or it's not protocol, it's BCP. And so I think once this does get adopted, it should move through the queue very quickly.
Good, thank you. Questions or comments from anyone? Okay, then we're moving towards the end here. Okay, now Roger, you can get up and. So let me just give a little preamble. We had the interim meeting last week, and actually I have to say that even from my point of view, it was a very successful meeting. And Roger's already indicated he thought it was successful. Certainly interested in anyone else who was there if you want to speak up and make a comment about it. The format was essentially that Roger, as editor of the fee extension document, chaired the meeting, moderated the meeting and the discussion, and people who had issues and concerns about the document brought them to the table, and we talked about them. And in an hour, we had a very productive meeting, and really got to a very good place, as Roger had reported earlier. And clearly, from the point of view of the success that we had in Chicago in having 2 sessions, one of which was a working session so that we could actually progress documents very directly, this really was a nice complement to that opportunity, and it focused on one single document. So unless anyone has any objections to whether or not we should do this, I think that having interim meetings going forward is a good thing. Now, this was kind of an experience even for your co-chairs to learn how to make all of this happen and understand all the administrative process that gets it going. We think we've got all that under control. We have learned one thing along the way that we didn't know before, which for this particular meeting, GoDaddy was kind enough to host it as a Zoom meeting. And that worked out for all of the participants, and no one objected to using that. But it turns out you can ask for me.co. So, we can use the IETF sort of standard for doing these things. So we can actually make a me.co request and then have that set up so that we can use that and everybody can be remote and we can have a meeting. So that's just something to keep in mind. It's certainly not a requirement. I mean, Zoom worked out well, and I think that, just speaking from the point of view of a chair, whatever technology works for the participants is fine for the interim meeting. It's just useful to know that option is available to us. We did not try and have 2 meetings at this particular meeting for mostly just time constraints. Part of it is the availability of your co-chairs in making that happen. But there is an open question here for the working group as to whether, if these interim meetings are so effective, do we really need to plan for 2 meeting requests? The IETF tends to want to discourage that unless you can really justify it. I think we did a good thing last time in justifying it. It helped this working group a lot. This working group tends to be a little slow moving, a little hard to keep people engaged and active. So, having the 2 meetings last time really proved that a working session is a good thing. I think the interim meeting proved that we can make effective use of those. So we don't have to answer the last question here about whether there's a demand for a work session now at the next meeting. But, you know, what we really should be thinking in terms of is for these documents that we currently are trying to close on, you know, the way to make the closure happen is to have an inter-meeting and to do this again. And, you know, as co-chair, as one of the chairs, I would just appeal to the document editors to ask for that and explicitly ask on the list and make that happen. The only real thing that you have to do is ask on the list if there's interest in having a meeting. And as long as we know at least 2 weeks in advance, so that at least 1 week in advance, we can submit all the formal documentation to the IETF for it and get it listed in the data tracker as a meeting that occurred, then it can happen. So you really just need to drive it. If you're a document editor, you want to move along a document, you really can just drive this. Just, you know, make sure that your chairs are informed and tracking with you, because we'll do the administrative side of working with the secretariat to get everything together and happen. But this is an opportunity for open discussion. People have an opinion about inter-meetings, not having them. Roger, do you want to say anything more about, you started to say before, I'll give you a chance that you ran this meeting and pushed on it and set it up.
Yeah, this is Roger. I'm not sure I have anything much more to say than what I said. It was very useful. We had 8 or 9 people attend. And as Jim mentioned, we worked through some pretty good items, actually at a pretty quick pace. And that's why I would still suggest trying to get a face-to-face meeting here. That virtual meeting was nice because we were sort of face-to-face. And it seems to work better than emailing and waiting for someone to respond. The list works for, I think, certain things, but I think the interim meeting or the face-to-face here allows for more in-depth discussions to occur. So,
great. Thank you for that. So just my takeaway from that is you want to leave open the question of a second work session at the next meeting. Let's not lose track of that, but definitely promoting interim meetings and doing it again. So document authors, keep that in mind so we can move things along. Okay. Any other discussion or comments from anyone about interim meetings? Okay, not seeing anyone in the Meet Echo queue. I guess there's nothing in the Jabber. So, all right. So that actually brings us to the end of our agenda. This is the opportunity we get to say any other business. And we got people lining up at the queue. Wow. Oh, scary how quickly people stood up.
No, this is
Scott, please go ahead.
Scott Hollenbeck. This is a good thing. We've got other things to talk about. Okay, so those of you who were at the meeting in Chicago or saw the meeting minutes may recall that I had asked a question about an individual submission internet draft that was written by myself and 2 of my colleagues. It describes a method for doing search in RDAP using regular expressions. One of the bits of feedback we got was, no, don't do base 64 URL encoding. You can just use standard URL encoding. Indeed, we investigated that, found out that it works just fine. So the document was updated to reflect that change. However, one of the other things I took away from that meeting when I asked for who might be actually interested in using this, pursuing it, or whatever, there was absolutely no response at all. So I don't want to work on something that people have no interest in, and so I just wanted to ask one more time before we kind of let this one die. Is anyone interested in seeing that particular document move forward? Okay. I am seeing one hand up.
Yeah. And I would certainly suggest, you know, putting that on the mailing list. Obviously, I think you would do that anyway, but just call it out.
Okay, thank you.
Dmitry Belevsky, Technical Center of Internet. If anybody is interested in using email address internationalized in UPP, I will be glad to discuss it. Thank you.
So I'm sorry, I didn't catch the question on what email address in what?
Email address internationalized, EAI.
Oh, an EAI.
Okay. With non-ASCII left part. So I would like to discuss it if anybody is interested. Thank you.
Okay.
I am Mario Lofredo from Register.it. I would like to present in a couple of minutes an idea about to improve interoperability between RDAP clients and server. And I would like to know if, in your opinion, it's worth to be developed and presented in a draft. The idea is based on the JSON schema concept. The JSON schema is described in a free internet draft of JSON-based working group, and it defines the media type application / schema plus JSON, a JSON-based format for describing the structure of JSON data. It asserts what a JSON document must look like, the ways to extract information from it, and how to interact with it. This idea was born from the fact that currently the RDAP APIs are not self-descriptive, and this is there is a consensus on the web on the fact that a modern REST APIs should be self-descriptive. And currently in RDAP there is no way for the server to provide the formal description of its feature. There is the help endpoint, but it returns a human-readable but not machine-processable information, and such information can be heterogeneous. The server cannot provide formal information about which RDAP query capabilities implements and which subset of the standard response or which response extensions it returns. So the client cannot configure itself according to the server feature. And as a consequence, the user can waste time to submit requests that cannot be accepted because they are not implemented at all, or because they are not allowed according to the user access level. The client must know the feature of all the servers it interacts with. If a server changes its feature, this causes an additional implementation effort by the client implementers.
So can no, I'm sorry to interrupt. I want to ask one question though. Did you have are you presenting this for information to this working group, or did you have an ask of this working group with respect to this?
I would like to know if this idea it's worth to be developed, it's worth to be presented in a draft, or it's a waste of time to go on this idea.
Okay, all right. So I apologize for interrupting you, sir. Let me let you finish. Oh,
yes.
Are you done? Okay. Do we have comments or questions on that as opposed to a new item? I think the guy behind you there wants to step up and comment.
So this is Andy Newton Aaron. So I have a draft, it may have expired already, on describing the RDAP data structures in JCR, not JSON schema. And I'll note that both JCR and JSON schema are not standards or IETF. There are IETF drafts for both of them, but the IETF is on nowhere with both. So as far as trying to put the JSON that RDAP uses into a more formal structure or a more formal schema definition, I think is an interesting idea. Obviously, since I wrote a draft about it, I do have a problem with the issue of clients somehow understanding either JCR or JSON schema and then adapting their behavior. That idea has been around for a long time. The people who did SOAP and those type of things, that's one of the things they sold us on. I don't think that's a good path to go down. So when we're talking about interoperability, yes, I think it's a good idea to have a more formal definition of what those structures are. But if we're doing that because we think clients are going to somehow change their behavior, I think that's a false expectation. So I do want to point out that RDAP currently does have the RDAP conformance structure in the very top of the response, which says, here's what these servers do support. So,
before you sit down, a question for you to respond to. Do you think this is an appropriate forum for this discussion, or would you suggest that it should be visited somewhere else?
I hope we're talking about specifically about RDAP and not JSON schemas. Yeah, no, this is probably the appropriate forum. If there are interoperability issues with RDAP, people writing clients and servers, then yeah, this is probably the place to do it. And if we want to go down this path of trying to write a more formalized schema around it, yeah, this would be the place to do it. I don't know what I don't know is how many other people are interested in it. You have 2 so far, right?
So let me ask that question. Anyone else want to express interest in the topic or have an opinion at this point about it? Because I think, well, Scott, please go ahead.
Scott Hollenbeck. I'm surely interested in it. I mean, I see some value to what both Andy and Mario are saying. And Andy, you might just have been a little bit ahead of the curve initially, but I do think it's interesting now that we've had 2 people independently, kind of come up with the same idea here. So I wouldn't want to just reject this out of hand. I think it's something that is worth discussing.
So yeah, back into the spirit of the purpose of this working group in again, 2 roles. One is also an opportunity for, people to bring interesting topics and ideas to an appropriate set of experts. Let me suggest, Mario, that actually you should write an internet draft. It can be, an individual submission for right now, and then make it visible to this working group and ask for comments. And then similarly, I'll look back to Andy, check on the status of your document and resurrect it if necessary. And also, when the 2 of these come out together, make them both visible together. And then the working group, we can reconsider. I mean, if you guys both want, I'm sure we can make time in our agenda probably at our next meeting and give you an opportunity to talk about the 2 documents, and we can see what discussion comes from it.
Yeah. So I think the challenge is going to be, I think the challenge in trying to say we need a formal data definition language to use is finding that right thing to do. Like I said, neither JCR or JSON schema are internet standards, and so you're going to have to cross that bridge when you get to it. So I think the first question ought to be, do we need this? And then the second question is going to be the harder one, which is, what do we do then, right?
All right, thank you for that. So we'll make that the primary, the do we need this as kind of the primary question that we would examine at our next meeting if we take the presentations, put them up there. Okay. Next topic.
Right. Chris from Core Association. I want to bring us back a little bit, again, into the beginning and into the fees extension. And I have a general comment which I think was more appropriate now than when we were discussing the specifics. And that is, I have noticed that many of the registries have quite a few differences in the way that they implement the fees extension. And especially because, of course, we also have multiple versions of it, then we end up with essentially more or less every registry implementing as if they're implementing a separate extension. And a lot of the time, does it make sense? Some registries, for example, they don't even have a currency. They just put XXX instead of the currency, and they expect you to send XXX. I don't know what we can do, or if anything, or if we should just, the registrars should bother the registries to actually comply with the extension, or if, I don't know what can be done to ensure that the adoption of this extension is uniform between the registries in the same way, because otherwise does it actually make sense to have this in this way? I mean, just something that we should consider.
So I'll offer 2 comments. On the one hand, one of the reasons for the fee extension is because there are different implementations of the way people do it. So, and those of us who are here are trying to pay attention to that, and that's a good thing. The other thing is, you're right, currently, even those who have implemented this extension, because it's gone through a couple of iterations, we are at different places in that cycle. But I fully expect that for those of us who have implemented it, and speaking partly for myself, but I'm fairly certain I'm not speaking out of turn by suggesting that even VeriSign plans to implement the latest stable version once we get to that point. We'll certainly upgrade and be in that place. Protocol adoption in general in the IETF, I can make the standard kind of response to that. People do things because they're good and they work for them, right? There's no enforcement mechanism for IETF standards, but hopefully we have, the significant people here, and people will see the value and they'll want to adopt it. So I don't think we can take on the responsibility of promoting adoption, although that's kind of implicit in having the right people in the room who are developing the standard. But anyway, James, over to you.
Yeah, this is Jim Gould from VeriSign. I was going to comment on this one, then I had a separate topic. But I would say it's better to have these drafts, otherwise they're going to have a bunch of custom extensions that the registries will implement in 5 different ways. So that's a positive, but I do agree with you that there are complexities with the registries following what the intent of the draft is. So, and even implementing the version that we implemented, which was the 06 prior to the working group taking it, we had saw some issues in that, and we had to make decisions on our own to get it to work, and that's what fed in with some of the feedback. I'm not sure how you can ensure it. That's, I guess there's not a...
Yeah. No, Scott Hollenbeck, and no, Internet Police hat off. But actually, there is something we can do. Move the document forward. Get it published as an RFC. And then implementers drive towards implementing the RFC.
Yeah, good point. Thank you for that. Very important.
Yes, I agree with that. Yes. And I mean, in general, we're all gathering here, or a lot of us might be gathering at the ICANN meetings. We should take that opportunity to kind of bring this up and push for it, for people to take it to where it actually is now and not where it was a year ago.
Thank you.
This, Roger. And yeah, I mean, when we finalize this draft, we will be suggesting to our partners to implement the current draft. We do not want to support multiple versions of this draft. For some time, I'm sure we will have a few versions that we run, but we will be getting rid of those. So we will be suggesting for our partners to move forward on this. And in the ICANN world, there is a tech ops group that's part of the registrar stakeholders group, and they brought this topic up independent a month or so ago about fee. And they didn't even know that this was being worked. Some of them did not know this was being worked here. So we have pushed back to that group that this is in the works and it's close to being done. So from the registrar standpoint, it is being evangelized through the ICANN world as well.
Great, thank you. Any other comments on the fee extension? Yeah, one more.
Jody Calker, GoDaddy. All I'm going to do is put in a plug for Tech Ops, join the group, join the discussion, and that's how we can push it forward.
Well, so it is an open list. Anybody can join. Be speaking to the mic, please.
That's a good question. I'm pretty sure registrars can join. It's a group from the registrar stakeholders group. So I'm sure that any registrar can join, but I'd have to look at that to make sure.
Yeah, and so let me suggest, if you wouldn't mind, explicitly, figure that out and send a note to the mailing list and make it visible to everyone who's on the list. Whatever constraints are there, say that too, but point out how to subscribe and such and about the list.
Good point.
Okay. New topic. Back to James.
Yeah, this was brought up at the last IETF and is around file formats, specifically around the data escrow drafts that are out there that are being implemented by a lot of folks, by pretty much this group. The other is the bulk file format draft that I've created. I have not proposed to bring that forward yet, but my hope is that once we get experience with it, to then bring it forward. I guess the question was, I could not remember where we left it on the file format drafts, and whether or not that's in scope or out of scope for this working group.
Well, unfortunately, part of what happened in that is I will admit to having dropped the ball on one particular key issue, and that is we had a transition of area directors in March, and in that transition, although I had on my list of things to talk to our prior area director about it, I had not talked to our new area director about the fact that those documents, this is probably the best place for those documents to exist. They're not really strictly EPP or RDAP. So, we need to have that negotiation with our area director and obviously the ISG has to weigh in on whether they think something belongs in this group or not in that sense, because they're strictly speaking a little out of scope, but on the other hand, they're kind of in scope for the concept of what we're doing here.
So I guess the question is, what's the next step? So we have these drafts out there. I think the data escrow one's been out there for years and it's been implemented by many people. The goal from the authors is to move those forward, and we're trying to find a place for those to go.
So there's two next steps. One is now, thank you for raising that again. I need to have a discussion with Adam here about where these documents fit and tell him what they are and what's going on and see what he wants to do about that. But under the assumption that So I either we'll move forward with bringing them into this group, which will then bump up against the can't do anything until other things go out the door, or he will say, okay, he understands, he wants to do something else with them, then he'll take them on board. But I'll have that discussion with him, and then we'll send a note to the list and let everybody know where that's going to go. So yeah, thank you for that.
So Andy Newton, Aaron. So I just want to say that I do think this is the right place for that. What his document, and I read it, talks about is a similar problem to what we commonly see as bulk who is, and there are formats for that as well, which kind of bumps up against the RDAP stuff, right? I think it's a slightly different problem, but I think this is the place to make sure that we don't conflate the two things, right? So.
And you know, having said all of that, and since our area director is actually listening here, anyone else want to comment for or against this working group adopting these documents? Hopefully people will remember the documents since we've talked about them in the past. And I'm not seeing a lot of nodding heads, but at least a couple of the principals have made a comment. So, all right. So, all right. Adam, you want to comment? Our esteemed area director.
Adam Roach. No, what I wanted to bring up was, I mean, probably the two paths forward would be changing the charter and putting it in here, or AD sponsoring it. And what would make the difference between those two is really how many working group participants are likely to actually work on them. If we can get broader review by putting it in here, then I think I'd like to go down that path. If it's just really going to be, you know, the one or two people who are working on it already, then we probably can go ahead and AD sponsor it. I definitely prefer the first if we could get enough interest, though. So I mean, if people just want to like raise a hand and say, yes, we'll work on this, that would be helpful, or you can take that on the list either way. But that would be a useful input to making that decision.
So let's do a quick little a hum, I guess, is the way to do this. People want to hum and indicate their support for this document in general and moving it forward. So I'll do two hums, one those in favor and a hum for those opposed. So those in favor? Oh wait, Roger, did you want to comment?
Can we have a different hum on the document that we're trying to discuss? And again, I'd like it to go to the mailing list because I know I've read it. I can't say that I'm familiar with it today. So
fair enough. Maybe I shouldn't go forward. We should do it on the mailing list because we're resurrecting discussions that happened some number of months ago, and not everyone's going to have it in the top of their mind.
Can I clarify the request?
Yes.
The first request is whether or not file format drafts are in scope for this working group. That's number one. And then if there were a hum, it would be under the data escrow drafts, which have been implemented by many, many folks. I'm not sure about in this room, but.
Right. There are a couple of file format documents. There's the data escrow stuff and there's the pricing stuff. So there's actually two of those. And then there's a separate bulk access document, right? Or that's what you meant by data escrow? That's what you meant? No. So there are three separate things to worry about here. Yeah.
There are two drafts for data escrow, and then there's one for bulk file format. Okay, and then GoDaddy had another one for pricing.
Yeah, for the file formats or pricing documents.
Is there another one?
No.
Unavailable name. Put it this way, it's a different classification of work.
Yes.
So whether or not that's in scope or not. Yes.
Thank you. Okay. Any other business? Francisco.
Yeah, Francisco Arias Icon. Speaking of reviving drafts, there is a draft on the TMCH, the ICANN TMCH specification. The interface was originally, or at some point, was in the charter and was dropped at some point by lack of priority or something like that. I'm actually not clear on why it was dropped, and I was wondering if there is a path, what is the path to reviving this draft?
The reason why that document was dropped was because the IDN matching rules were unacceptable. There's just inconsistency on the ICANN side about that. So from my point of view, it was Patrick Fulstrom, you know Patrick, okay, who was the principal objector. And, you know, there are just so few people who are experts on that space and dealing with this issue. If you go back and you look in the archives and find the messages, Patrick was very clear about his issues. And until those issues are resolved, we really can't move the document forward. And I realize that sounds like we have one person blocking a document, but they're just, he's an expert. If anyone else wants to stand up and be one, you've got to have that discussion with Patrick and resolve it.
So Francisco again, so I think that conversation already happened months ago, and as far as I understand, the issue was clarified. I think it was more of a miscommunication between the authors and Patrick. And my understanding is that issue was solved and clear, but then maybe there was some step that was not taken to revive this document in the working group.
So thank you for that. I mean, I can only say that from my point of view, and speaking on behalf of Antoine as co-chairs, I mean, as far as we know, it was delegated back to Patrick and it's Gustavo, right? Yeah, to resolve. If it has actually been resolved, we were not aware of that. So you just need to bring that information forward onto the mailing list, and then we can take it from there. And of course, now since that document was actually dropped off our milestone list, it now bumps up against in order to move it forward, we have to finish what we're doing, and then we get to add it back in and make it happen.
Okay,
so.
Thank you, Francisco. And so just to see if I understand. So next step will be for Gustavo to go to the mailing list and explain what was done and to clarify that this is solved, so that and request adoption of the document.
Yeah, I mean, to be a strict point of process thing, I guess he has to send in a revised document with whatever changes came out of that, and I guess it's still it was a regex working. I don't think it was left as an individual submission, right? It actually had been renamed, so he can revise the document, and so it becomes active again. But he'll have to ask for the working group to reconsider the issues. He should respond to the original note from Patrick about what the issues were, and then he'll have to, even though it's going to be named as a working group, as if it was a working group document, we're still going to have to go through a working group adoption process for it, just to be fair.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. And I saw Antoine pop up there, and I'm wondering, is he trying to type anything in Jabber by any chance, or is it comment? Okay. I don't know if the voice works or not. You want to try and speak, Antoine? Is your mic working now?
Or I have your comment from the Jabber.
I think I'm a bit low on volume, am I?
You're really quite muffled. It's a little hard to hear you. So, yeah, let Suzanne read it.
So the comment from Antoine, the TMCH document was also rejected since it's only describing an ICANN process and not a general process. So it should be informational.
Okay, yeah, thank you for that. That's a status question, but we can, we'll need to keep that in mind too. So did you get that, Francisco? If you want to comment on that and make that, if you want to make a pitch for something different, then Gustavo will need to say that too when he brings the document back up. So, okay. Any other business? Questions, comments from anyone? Where are the blue sheets? Just hold them up, please. It would be nice if not only would you hold them up so I can see them, if you could bring them to the front of the room here, and I'd appreciate that. And I guess there should be two of them. I only see one. Where'd the other one go? Look around you on your floor, folks. Somebody's got it. I don't want them to get lost. Oh, there we go. All right, we got them both. So, all right, that's it. Thank you very much, everyone. We're adjourned. Thank you. Yes, and a special